Daniel couldn't even picture it that morning how it had already been a bit of time since he and his friends had graduated from the University of Babylon. They'd already been in their jobs. They were doing so well. Nebuchadnezzar had even mentioned that to them that day before. Even though they were encouraged and they were told about all these good things that they had been doing, Daniel and his friends didn't let this go to their heads. Not only were they keeping up with their studies, they were keeping up with their diet, and they kept up with their prayers. As they encouraged each other every single time that they would meet, that even in the hard times, God's still there. God's still with us no matter what's happening, no matter what's going on. He is the one that's in control. They never forgot about that. But even with that, Daniel would tell them from time to time how God had been speaking to him and how God had been giving him some dreams. They thought this was kind of strange, but at the same time, they knew that members of the royal family in different ages had been given dreams and the interpretation of dreams. And even as they were talking about that, they remembered the story of Joseph and how even in the unlikely of situations, he was doing what God had asked him to do and kept faithful even when thrown into prison and told that he was almost worthless. Daniel and his friends went back to their own residence and went to sleep that night, and little did they know that a major changing event was about to happen. That night, Nebuchadnezzar could not sleep at all. He had a dream that was troubling, that was even more troubling than Pharaoh's dream of old. Problem is, he woke up in the middle of the night, went back to sleep, had it again, woke up in the morning, and he could not remember what he dreamed. Or did he? They weren't sure. He wasn't sure. If he did remember it, he was playing with them to see what was going on. But Nebuchadnezzar called all of his people to come and tell him the dream and the interpretation. Now, his people had been conniving for years, and they did things that were against him, and Nebuchadnezzar was starting to realize this. And some of his people were starting to wonder, maybe he actually knew, but he's actually playing with us right now. Whether that's the case or not, they never knew. But Nebuchadnezzar got so frustrated, so mad, because they were giving him all these excuses and saying, well, only the gods can tell you your dream, and we don't have access to that. And, well, then what have you been telling me all this time? They didn't know what to say. So Nebuchadnezzar turned to his guards and said, since this is the case, here's what I want you to do. I want you to round up everyone that says that they can interpret my dreams, and I want you to kill them. Not a one is to be left alive. Then we'll get new wise people, and we'll see what they do. Guards said okay, and they started going from house to house to house, collecting all these people, and finally they got to the residence where Daniel was and different houses where his three friends were, and they rounded him up. But when that happened, Daniel said, whoa, hold on just a second. Because by this time he had had a very close connection with the captain of the guard. So the two sat down, and Daniel said, okay, what exactly is going on? Why exactly have you come here to try to take my life? And the guard said, well, first of all, please understand, I'm not doing this of my own accord. I'm doing this because of what the king commanded. Daniel looked at him kind of strange and commanded what? I haven't even heard about this. Where is this decree? It didn't even come to us. He said, well, the king had a dream last night, and supposedly he can't remember it. And now he's saying that because no one is able to tell him the dream or his interpretation, he's going to kill everybody. Daniel was really worried about this because he had experienced this himself before in Israel, where there were other kings that had similar dreams and situations and killed people because either they didn't get what they wanted or they weren't given what they needed. Daniel was praying the whole time that this wasn't the case, but he had a feeling that this was the case. And he looked at the captain of the guard and said, well, hold on just a second. Here's what I want to do. Take me before the king. Captain of the guard looked at him and went, whoa, hold on just a second, Daniel. If I take you before this guy, it's going to be my head, not yours. And he looked at him and he shook his head and he said, hold on. Because you're with me, God has promised that you will be saved. He wanted to laugh, but he knew that Daniel was saying the truth. So he said, well, whatever you say, let's go and do it. So he took Daniel to Nebuchadnezzar's throne room, and Nebuchadnezzar saw Daniel, and he knew that something was up, and knew that maybe he'd actually get an answer. Daniel looked at him, and he said, I don't have the answer for you, king. And Nebuchadnezzar got mad right there and was about to toss him out. And Daniel said, hold on just a second. Well, I don't have the answer for you. My God does, because I believe that he is the God of all gods, and he gave you that dream for a reason. And here's what I am requesting of you right now, O king, is that you give myself and my friends time to pray about this and then come back to you with the dream and the answer. Nebuchadnezzar looked at him and said, you're just trying to make excuses. Daniel said, no, I'm not. You know me, you know how I work. Nebuchadnezzar chuckled and said, you're right. I forgot. You're right. Here's what I'll do. 12 hours, not a moment later. But even with that, since your God is who he says he is, I'll give you 6. Daniel knew that he better get out of there fast, because Nebuchadnezzar was one that was known for shortening the amount of hours. So he gets home and they start praying and they go to bed that night. And about 5 hours into it, Daniel wakes up with a jolt, realizing that he had been given the dream. Not only was he given the dream, but he was given the interpretation as well. Daniel wakes up his friends, and they're all excited because of what God has done. They pray once again, and Daniel gets ready to go to the king. And his friends walk beside him to the palace entrance, praying the whole time, knowing that God was going to be doing something amazing. Daniel leaves them there, still in prayer, and he walks with the captain of the guard into the very throne room of Nebuchadnezzar. The first thing he does as he gets to the throne room is he bows graciously and he says, "O king, live forever. Even though you've been given a dream, I have a God who is the God over all gods that continues to live forever and ever and ever. He gave you that dream, O king, and he showed me your dream and its interpretation." Nebuchadnezzar looked at him and he laughed and he said, "Okay, well then what was it?" Daniel looked at him and said, "In your dream you saw a statue. That statue, first you saw a head made of gold. You saw an arms and chest made out of silver. You saw thighs made out of bronze and legs made out of iron. and feet mixed with iron and clay. Nebuchadnezzar went, "Well, that sounds familiar." Daniel said, "Oh, but I'm not done, O king. What you saw next was a stone that was taken out of a mountain, formed without hands, that came and struck the statue at the feet and destroyed the statue fully till all that was left was blown away in the winds. That stone became a mountain that encompassed the whole earth." The king looked at him and said, "Oh, that is my dream. That is my dream. But what does it mean?" Daniel said, "You, O king, you are the head of gold." Now, Nebuchadnezzar liked that because that's what his kingdom was. It was gold. And he thought it was going to reign forever. Daniel said, "O king, but you need to remember, after you comes one that is inferior, one that's made of silver. But even after that will come one that is made out of bronze, that's even more inferior. But after that will come one that is as sharp as iron and will come destroying and to destroy. But even that will be destroyed itself. But the final area will be that of clay mixed with iron, very unstable. But in the end, as you saw that stone strike the feet, that stone is God himself, who in the end will set up his kingdom on this earth and will reign forever and ever and ever." Nebuchadnezzar was so excited that he finally had his dream and finally had the interpretation, that he ordered the guards to go and release all the men that were being held to be killed that morning. Daniel and his friends were so excited, and they prayed. They thanked God. They thanked him for what he did. But Nebuchadnezzar did something that seemed uncharacteristic of him. He wrote a decree ordering that all worship the God of Daniel because of what he had done, and to see the might and the power of his God. Daniel knew that God was going to be doing amazing things. What he didn't realize was that Nebuchadnezzar had some plans that weren't exactly what God was wanting him to do. Plans of a bigger statue, of sending Daniel to his wife's countryland to get things, to make sure Daniel was out of the way. But ultimately, Daniel would hear stories forever of people that were willing to stand up against a king who didn't want to follow what God had said. But Nebuchadnezzar kept being plagued by this dream, knowing that God was telling him something, but not wanting to follow it, because he knew that in following it, he would go against the very command that he was given to start with, and that was that his whole nation was supposed to be forever. So he started making plans to make sure that his dynasty would last forever and ever and ever.